Hi, my name is Megan Tobin, and this is my presentation on the Texas power crisis. A brief overview of what led to this crisis. There's 2 weeks in February this past year of 2021 where Texas experienced severe winter-like conditions. This is not common for the state, as they typically can see an average of zero point 0.1 inches of snow, and there was parts of the state that got well over 16 inches of snow. And this happened over a span of 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, a lot of people had lost power due to power infrastructure issues, including Texas's own power grid. The storms left millions without power. They were unable to travel due to road conditions. There was over 200 people that have died as of July this year, and damages have cost over $20 billion. Now, 10 years prior, they had a similar storm called the Groundhog Day blizzard that caused similar issues. After the storm, there was an investigation into what had caused all of this, and politicians and regulators were warned and informed to winterize their power infrastructure because this could happen again, and if it does, it could be worse. They did not listen to those warnings. The state did not handle this crisis well at all. I would say that this was actually a pretty poor handling of a crisis due to the different aspects of how situations could have been handled and how they were handled. The biggest one is that this could have been avoided, or at least the damages could have been avoided to a certain extent. Previous warnings were ignored, as mentioned in the previous slide. Had they had not, like I said, millions would have not suffered from the damages, and it wouldn't have been as costly to the state. Texas officials such as Governor Abbott, who technically is the face of the crisis, chose to deflect from the real issue at hand, which is that there was an issue with the power infrastructure. He decided to point fingers and say that it was caused by wind turbines and the Green New Deal, and was going on news outlets to display this rather than to help his constituents. This also was to promote his own agendas and ideas. Social media became a huge part of this crisis on both ends. A lot of people in the state, so a lot of Texans, were using social media to show the country, even the world, what was going on in their state, which caused more of an uproar from people in the country wondering what was happening and why wasn't there enough being done. Not only that, but on the other end too. I mean, you saw Ted Cruz on social media. There's a video of him leaving the state where he should have been there helping his people, the people that had voted him in. A crisis communication plan would have helped maneuver this crisis as well. There was not one to seem that there was in place. Yes, FEMA was contacted. Yes, there was an emergency order, but it wasn't enough that was really getting out to the Texans that they were being taken care of and that aid was being provided to them. Addressing the public is really important in crises like this. And this was a statement that I had written up as if it were the governor writing this to the publics. This statement, I think, is important because it highlights where they're at with the crisis, where it's going, what people should do now, and where to find that aid and assistance. On top of that, it highlights the importance because a lot of people during this time are not only trying to figure out what to do next, but they're also figuring out who to blame and why this is happening. And while that is important to address in this moment when you're in a crisis, we want to make sure that we're taking care of each other and getting that aid to people. And I think this statement highlights we will have that conversation, but now is not the time to be pointing fingers. A lot of times with crises, there's deflecting rather than just taking ownership and coming at the issue at hand. And you can still hold someone accountable, but there's a time and a place for that. And I think that this message to the public is really important because it highlights all those aspects. This crisis, you would think, would be under the accidental cluster due to the fact that it was involving a natural disaster, but I would put this under the preventative cluster due to the fact that there should have been precautions taken from 10 years prior, and there was not. And this crisis highlights the importance of taking precautions when warned and advised by others. On top of that, the preventative cluster has the most negative effect on an organization's reputation. So, this is critical for a company organization to handle this correctly moving forward. Like I mentioned, social media had been a huge part of this crisis on both sides. And a big part of that, too, was that this crisis has affected minority and lower income communities the most. And so social media was also very important to highlighting what those communities are going through and how little regard there is for these communities. On top of that, Governor Abbott is the face of the crisis, as mentioned earlier, and he really should not be playing politics in a situation like this. And I think that goes for any politician. When you're in a crisis, you want to be putting your people first. You're thinking of others. You want to get a fix rather than pointing fingers or deflecting. And I think that's another huge takeaway from this crisis, is making sure that you're not only preventing it from happening again, but not deflecting either and taking it hands on.